Well, despite the fact that publicly most of the Democratic Party appears to be all in for Uncle Joe, he's not out of the woods yet. In fact, uh, he's going on a trip this weekend into the woods, specifically to Camp David, where NBC News, of all sources, or of all outlets, is reporting that Biden is meeting with his family, essentially to have a come to Jesus meeting about his inability to run a presidential campaign, let alone be president. I mean, everyone knew from the beginning that he was never going to actually be president. All he had to do was get through a campaign. And in 2020, he was able to clear that bar just barely. And after that, the special interest groups and various party apparatchiks took over the job of actually running the White House, whether he was fully conscious or not on any given day. However, now we are in election season again. Biden has to at least outwardly appear that he is actually the president. And as we discussed, as everyone saw on Thursday, it is clear that mentally he is not capable of being the president, even if you sort of close your eyes, plug your ears, and pretend it is so. Everyone knows that he is a puppet figurehead, but that's not good in an election. People, in order to be motivated to get out and vote, they kind of need to think that they are actually voting for a real candidate. They need to feel like they have someone to vote for, or else what motivation do they have to get up off their ass and march themselves down to the polling place in order to hand you all that power? And moreover, from the family's perspective, and I imagine this is what they will be talking to him about today. Today is when this meeting is happening. They're probably quite embarrassed for their father and grandfather. The family, I think, has plenty of money. I don't think that they're worried about their well-being if he were to step down. However, especially the last 4 months of a presidential campaign, it's only going to get more intense. It's only going to get more stressful. At this point in his life, I mean, that could just put undue stress on him as a person. When he's already this far gone, why not just enjoy the rest of your life? You're 81. You're clearly slipping. Why not just relax? Just let it go. And obviously, as someone who is not a fan of Biden and wants to see him lose, I don't think that it would be a net positive for someone like me, for my personal interests, for him to step down, because while it is very difficult, I think, to credibly replace a presidential candidate after a primary, the Dems will probably have a better shot at winning if they do that, depending on who they choose. And so, as far as I'm concerned personally, it's most advantageous for Biden to remain in place and continue floundering as he is now, and watch his polling numbers evaporate. He's already not doing well in the polls. He wasn't doing well before this debate. He needed this debate to go well for him, and it did not. Granted, we are still in the summer. We're a long way from November. And so the fact that Trump is leading in the polls in the major swing states, that can easily evaporate and reverse before Election Day. But the question is, how likely is that if Biden's public persona continues to be tarnished by his own actions and his own lack of mental fortitude? How likely is it that as we get closer to Election Day that the polls will tighten in his favor if he's acting the way that he did on Thursday? And who knows, maybe the added stress accelerates his deterioration and he ends up looking even worse by Election Day. These are the things that the Democratic Party is going to have to consider, but today it is all about his children and grandchildren. Do they want to see their father and grandfather go through this? I know I wouldn't. I mean, that's a very easy call for me. If my grandpa was Joe Biden, I would tell him, let it go. I mean, you've freaking 4 years of being president in and of itself is a very stressful thing, and that's a massive lifetime achievement. It's like, you already want. There's no reason to go an extra 4 years. How about, hey, Grandpa, I'd like to see you more. We never get to see you if you're so busy being president. Now, I don't think that's the case. I don't think Joe Biden is probably very busy being president. I don't think that they include him on most things. But these are the sorts of things I would say to try and convince a loved one that I actually cared about to stop doing this to themselves. Unfortunately, according to this NBC article, they were quoting numerous Democratic anonymous sources, with knowledge of the situation. You know how they always love to play that game. And they all basically said the same thing, that this is Jill Biden's decision. This has nothing to do with Jobo. Jill is the one who is going to be making this decision, and it seems pretty darn clear. She wants to be the first lady. She wants her husband to be president. She is a full, what was Woodrow Wilson's wife's name? Marla or something like that? Martha Wilson? Maybe it was Martha Wilson. And so I don't think she cares if her husband dies in office, as long as it means that she can continue to be the First Lady of the United States for another day. It seems that is all worth it to her. Why else would you put your husband through this sort of humiliation? And it's, people say things like, oh, she's a second wife. How typical, gold digger. It's like, I mean, haven't they been together for like 50 years, even though she is the second wife? I mean, it's not like I don't know. People have said that he cheated on his first wife. I don't know. I'm not going to assume that about somebody. I mean, his first wife died when he was like 29 or something like that, or 30. And so as far as I'm concerned, I mean, they should have I would think these two have a normal marriage. I would think. Of all the terrible things I've heard about Joe Biden, I've never heard that there's anything like screwy with his marriage. I've never heard that, that they're like the swinging Ricadas or something. I mean, this woman should care about him. I mean, just on a human level. Yet, from what we see publicly, that doesn't seem to be the case. She's enabling this, and maybe you could call it support. Maybe that's how you want to interpret it. Maybe you say, okay, she's supporting her husband. Well, based on everything we've heard, and again, these are anonymous sources, so take that as you will. If anyone is going to convince him to drop out of this race, it would be her. Well, when you look at her up on stage, do you think that's acting? Do you think that's her just being supportive? Or do you think those are her genuine feelings, that she wants her husband to be put through this for another 4 years? That she wants to spend perhaps the last years that she has with him in the White House like this, where they will not, their time will be limited, at a certain point. Wouldn't you, at that stage, when you see your husbands like this, wouldn't you want as much time with him as a family as possible? I mean, I had a grandfather that had dementia. That's what we did. We tried to spend as much time around him as possible when he started to deteriorate, like Joe Biden is. So, it'd be interesting to see if we have any leaks that come out about this family meeting. What's interesting, though, there was an edit on the article that I read. NBC apparently had some Biden lackey come to them after the article was published and say, this isn't a formal family meeting or anything. I mean, to the extent that they talk about the campaign at all, I mean, that'll really be an afterthought. I mean, that's just tangential. This is just, hey, let's go visit Grandpa. It's like, oh, sure, I'm sure. Nobody's going to be thinking about that. When all the family gets together, no one is going to bring up, like, hey, Grandpa, we just watched you self-destruct on TV, and that was really sad for us to watch. We don't like to see you being put through that. So anyway, with that said, I will see you folks back here in the next one.